morning. Welcome back to Daybreak. It's now 20 minutes to 8 o'clock, and it's time to speak to one Rachel Shebesh, who is the Chief Administrative Secretary at the Ministry of Public Service and Gender Affairs. Good morning, Honorable. I think it's the first time we're seeing you in a long time. I hope you've been keeping well in the reality that the country faces of COVID-19. Maybe you can start by telling us the latest at the ministry in as far as the conversations around equality and what we know. There has been a meeting, an international meeting with the fellow ministers in charge of gender affairs.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's true. Just this week, we had a meeting with ministers of the Commonwealth countries who are in the docket of gender, and we were coming together to look at the uniqueness of countries and how they are dealing with COVID and how it is affecting the gender equation as well as impacting women and girls. And as a ministry, we were proud to present what we've done. And as you know, the country is now dealing with a lot of teen pregnancies. And we also know that GBV has increased quite a bit during this time of COVID. And therefore, we have been made to work in a different way. You know, as the Cabinet Secretary of Health says, it's a new normal. And so we have upped up our work on GBV. And speaking clearly about our number 1195, which is the number that you can call when you're going through any kind of violence as a woman. We have been working very seriously across the country, meeting county governments, county commissioners on the need to have a GBV recovery center in every county. I think we have covered probably more than 20 to 30 governors so far, and I have had very good reception with most of the governors. And there are counties that have set up GBV recovery centers in their level 5 hospitals, and there are those who are in the process of, and there are those that we are working with to start off. We are also working with the women representatives, 47 of them, to see whether we can set up safe houses, and that means again working with the county government, so that we complete the GBV cycle. The GBV cycle is that a victim needs to be able to go and report where they think they are safe, and that would be where obviously they would find the administration or the police. They then need to be treated immediately, which means going to a hospital.
Right.
They need also to be cancelled and to kept safe. That means a safe house. So until we get that loop right, we won't feel like we have achieved. So we are on that, and we are targeted on it, and we have clear timelines on the same.
Right.
We also have gone to the ground to increase the uptake of our affirmative action funds. Money that we give to groups to uplift their economic status, to the most vulnerable women, the mama mboga, the mama who is selling mitumba, the youth who wants to start a car wash with his group. That's where we are. We are upping that money quickly, and we are giving some concession on repayment because of COVID.
Right.
And so we are, those are some of the things that we are working on. Through the National Youth Service, of course, who are supervising Kazi Mtaani. We are also looking at how the Kazi Mtaani supervision is going on with NYS, and we are happy. Most of the young people are really happy about being given a chance to have something to do during this time of COVID, even if they were either in school or college or were doing another business that has been affected by COVID.
Right.
So we are also inspecting the Kazi Mtaani.
All right, and Honorable CAS, of course we know that the gender-based violence is one of the ills that have occurred since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in the country, but also because of the economic challenges that families are facing. I don't know, because your ministry represents both women and men, but are there any specific interventions that you'd point at that would ensure that households are able to better deal with the economic challenges they face now, to ensure that, yes, even as you take the women to safe houses, you're also building the basic social unit that is family?
Yes. You know, we are, these days we work as a whole government approach. Really, there is no ministry that's working in a silo. And that's why working together with Ministry of Interior, Labor, Health, Youth, we must bring all our, resources on the same table. So as we are giving the money that I have told you to the families so that they can at least have food on the table, because issues just like food on the table would start an argument between a man and his wife. And so there is also the intervention through the Ministry of Labor on cash transfer to the very vulnerable. When we take the young people out of the home and at least engage them in activity, again, we lessen the tension. But we are also saying as government that really we need help beyond just a government approach, because we are talking to cultural leaders, we are talking to youth leaders, we are calling women leaders together, because as a unit of the family, through even churches, we need people to learn to live together. And we know that this is a new situation because of COVID and the issue of curfew and the issue of not being able to move even from your area. We know that's why it has increased. But we also know that it still existed. GBV still existed. So our mechanisms of GBV continue, but our whole government approach and engaging community continues to be our priority as well.
Okay, all right. And of course, looking at the latest numbers from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, they said that up to 1.7 million people lost their jobs due to COVID-19 between March and June. So, of course, this more affects the women because these are the people that you find in the service industry more than men. Are there any specific interventions you'd point at that would ensure that, yes, they have lost their jobs for the meantime, but coming up with sustainable measures that would take them even beyond the coronavirus pandemic as we had planned for it?
That's exactly actually what we are doing in our ministry, led by Professor Margaret Kobia. My cabinet secretary is very clear about impact. She doesn't believe in just working to be seen to be working without the impact. And therefore, we have a serious monitoring and evaluation program. Kenya now are very used to the term table banking. And table banking is where you get money and put on the table and borrow amongst each other. Let's just be clear that we are hoping that when COVID gives us a break, that people will be able to go back to their jobs, not only women, even men. We hope everybody will be able to go back to their job. But for the time being, and as we wait for this curve to flatten, we really have only the option of giving them another opportunity to do business. And we don't just give money, we also train the same groups. So we are looking at a way that as the government is improving its access to jobs at this time of corona. And what I mean is that looking at prospects of opening up some businesses so that people can go back to work. There is even a discussion right now, the Ministry of Education reopening schools through community-based learning. That will mean at least teachers could go back to work. It would mean if we could ease the restrictions on hotels, those who are working in hotels could go back. But as we do that, and if we want to be practical and to be real, as a ministry, our mandate is to get women into business as much as possible as we wait for the economy to reopen. This money that we are taking to the ground we have enough money for good uptake. For example, today I will be in Kiambu and Nairobi, and tomorrow I will be going to Kericho, Eldoret, and Kisumu to continue to look for more and more women groups, to bring more leaders on board to give us these women to take the money. And we will only do what we can during this COVID period as we also plan what we can do post-COVID. I know everybody is asking post-COVID. I wish we could allow the team around COVID to give that direction as we as ministries do what we are entitled, what we are supposed to do with or without COVID.
All right, and of course, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic can never be understated because even this morning we're reporting over how a board of management teachers are suffering, having gone without a pay for 5 months. Let's now focus to other matters because in another life you're a politician. I don't know whether that has changed, but all the same, we know that now there's the conversation around reviewing the Constitution. I'm looking at the gender clause within the Constitution that not more than 2/3 of either gender shall be in any public office. That includes elective and appointive. If you're to look at the National Assembly, in 2013 there were 16 women that were elected to the National Assembly from the constituencies, the 290 of them. In 2017, 22, but one died along the way. Do you think this gender clause has really assisted and helped women to be more electable than men in as far as the fight against gender inequality is concerned?
Wow, we have had this conversation for so long. I mean, from the time I went into Parliament as nominated, through my being in Parliament, and now being in the ministry that is tasked to pass this, we have moved our conversation to the BBI. And the reason we've moved our conversation to the BBI is because we've tried this 3 times, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And so when we saw that it has hit a dead end, and there is an opportunity for the review of the Constitution, we have given our position as women, led by our Cabinet Secretary, all the women leaders that you are aware of, including the governors elected, the senators elected, members of parliament, women reps. We have moved not only with their political leadership, but we also brought on board women in different facets, those in civil society, women who are in academia, women in business. And we have moved our conversation to the BBI. And in our conversation to the BBI, we are a bit more specific on what the BBI should speak on. Because much as the Constitution gave us the not more than 2/3 gender rule, when it left that implementation and legislation to Parliament, that is where we had problems. In the county assemblies, that not more than 2/3 gender rule was clearly written and spelled out. And that's why MCAs come in according to the 2/3 gender rule. So in the BBI, we thought that let's engage robustly. And through this common women agenda, where we met severally, almost, I think we've sat on it since BBI began and since the handshake came. And I think what we have taken to the BBI is something that will at last deliver the right of women to be included in leadership positions. Yep.
I know the report of the BBI is not yet out, but there are those propositions that political parties would be tasked to ensure that their party list or their nomination list are able to observe the gender rule. Do you think, because we don't know what the report is, but there's the talk about amendment, do you think there'll be that possibility of really achieving what it is, and how exactly?
Actually, there's just for your information, already in the Senate, I think we are only missing 2 senators, and we would actually reach the threshold. So Senate is a house that can even do 50-50, because Senate we are not too bad on the Senate. In the National Assembly is where the issue is true. And yes, political parties, when you look at their constitutions and their manifestos, they talk about inclusion of women, but because they are not put on the table and forced to implement what they've written in their constitutions, they normally get away with it. This time, because of the way we have approached it in the BBI, it will be something that will be, demanded upon them by the political parties registrar, and even by the Constitution and the judiciary. We are not going to put any clause about women and 2/3 that will allow any more gerrymandering on the issue of 2/3. This time we are being very clear. And because the parties, we have also approached them, there is no political party and party leader that we did not approach with this, our suggestion around BBI. And all of them agreed to it. Some of them told us maybe this doesn't work, maybe amend that here, there. And we did. And so what we are believing, what we are taking to the BBI is in concurrence with the political parties and their leaders.
Okay, and of course, the harder challenge has been because you look at the elective positions of women representatives, they sort of leave the women to fight for those slots. But when it comes to these constituencies, 290 of them, or the 47 Senate positions, it is the women to fight it against the men. Sometimes they say that they're intimidated on the campaign trail. What policy changes are you putting in place as a ministry to ensure that come 2022, the play field will be different from the previous elections that we have had under the new constitution?
I didn't understand your question very well. Could you just repeat it, please?
Okay, I'm asking because traditionally what we have heard is that women find it so rough fighting for political office when it comes to campaigning for constituencies or the 47 Senate seats or even the governorship. So are there any interventions that you're coming up with as a ministry to make the women more resilient on the campaign trail? Of course, the challenge of financing is real. How exactly do you win over this?
Okay. Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because that's the reason why women shy away from vying for political seats. One, money, and it's true. You do need money to vie for any seat, by the way, even that one MCA. And if you shift that responsibility to the political parties, because political parties do finance their candidates. If you look at what political parties also do when it comes to nomination, to get a nomination certificate or ticket for your party, if many political parties give their women a lesser amount for the seat, and that's already a method of trying to support more women to run because of the issues of money. The other thing that really scares women is violence. And violence has been used in politics for too long, and it needs to stop. And therefore, in the new BBI and position that we're putting around this, violence against women during elections should be something that should make the opponent, disqualified from that race. We actually used it in the last election quite effectively. And if you look at the last election versus the rest, you will see that the issue of violence was reduced because it was a serious issue. Parties were called to write statements where there was violence within their parties. And basically, that's the way we will continue going. We hope that our young men and women who are used to perpetuate violence at this time of elections will also have learned a lesson and know that even if you're supporting a political candidate, it doesn't mean that you also are engaged and bought into, spreading violence. So the issue of money and violence, those are true. But we continue to work with them, and it is not just policy of our ministry. It must be within the rules and the regulations that are in political parties.
Okay, all right. And I want us to wind up as CAS because we know that in this country there has been the political hate that is coming, especially from the government that you also sit in. Just sometimes last week we saw the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Environment speaking against Deputy President William Ruto, calling him a clerk. From where you sit, what are you observing that you would signal to some discomfort within Cabinet? Is this the party that you campaigned for in 2017?
I've just seen that clip right now. I had really not understood what was going on until today morning. And I have seen that clip that you've just talked about by the Cabinet Secretary. I would not be able to speak on behalf of him or on behalf of Cabinet. But as a Chief Administrative Secretary appointed by the Jubilee government and very, very aware of my work and very, very committed to delivering on my mandate, I would not at any point allow anything that comes from my mouth to create some confusion or some tension, and I would use my platform at this time to do a lot of, bringing people together, making sure people understand what government is doing, ensure that the work being done by the president is seen, and especially that it has impact, as I told you, my Cabinet Secretary insists on. And so I would really, at every time, irrespective of where people are politically, government is not supposed to be seeing political lines. We are supposed to see across this country, because once you are elected as a president, you're the president of the country, irrespective of where your votes came from. So I think everybody should be responsible in the way they are working. I would not be able to say why he said it or didn't say it, but I would say, in my shoes, I would not address a leader of any stature in a way or manner that would demean my office or that would create confusion or tension.
But does the situation currently within the Jubilee administration bother you for someone who really campaigned for the Jubilee Party in 2017?
It doesn't only bother me, it bothers everybody. But I think when you sit on the table where we are, and when you engage at the level where we are, it would be a lot of work to try and explain why there is turmoil in Jubilee. It would be too much work. It would mean we stop everything and go into explaining and go into saying this happened, this didn't happen. And honestly, the president has told us never to engage in that conversation.
Okay.
We are supposed to be working, and that's what we are doing. So we would not ever engage in why there is tension or not tension, or when we think it will end, or who we think is creating it. The day the president speaks on these issues is when you know what Jubilee Party is saying, and that's the day you'll know what also Shebesh will be saying.
Okay, thank you so much. Well put, and cleverly so, I must say. Rachel Shebesh, the CAS at the Ministry of Public Service and Gender Affairs, thank you for joining us this morning to have that conversation about the politics of gender. And that's our time on Daybreak. But Willis Raburu is back in a short while. He'll be talking about Sporty Monday, reviewing the action of the weekend and the prospects in the coming days.